My name is Robyn Doolittle, and I'm a reporter at the Globe and Mail. What we did was we collected all of this data from across the country. Then we married that data with statistics on the gender probability of first names. 90% of names in Canada are associated with a specific gender at least 95% of the time. So really high degree of certainty. And this created this big map of the workforce here where you could actually look and compare people at different genders at different levels in the same jobs, et cetera. And what we found was that there was a salary problem, but the real thing here was just the lack of women earning six figures, the lack of women in management jobs when we did keyword searches there, the lack of women at the top, the lack of women at the middle. And this is where we really shifted that focusing on pay wasn't telling the full story. We really needed to look at power and who had it and who doesn't.
Data was a really important first step. It really showed us what the issue is. But now, how do you suggest our country tackle this? How can we make more progress?
I mean, I've been asked this question so many times since we started doing this. I think step one is more transparency, more data. Like that really, I mean, what we were able to do is looking at a very specific and narrow slice of the workforce. But we should be looking at the entire workforce. Like we're just looking at public institutions. So these are entities that are owned or paid for by government. So, you've got your core government, like your city hall, provincial governments. You've got universities, healthcare places, although we haven't published that part of the series yet. Crown corporations, public corporations, private businesses. We are mostly a black hole here. The other thing, of course, is that we were only able to look at gender because all we had to work with was names, and the only truly predictive thing you can say with a name is gender. So we couldn't look at race in a comprehensive way. We did look at the top 1% of earners in every entity and everyone running these different entities. And we phoned all of the, I think like 300 or 400 women and asked how they identified. Not surprisingly, of the very few women who make it to the top, almost all of them are white. That required us manually phoning hundreds of people. We should just have this information public, right? This shouldn't just be on gender, but by all measures of diversity or equity seeking groups. In the UK, for example, every business that has 200 or 50 more employees has to publish wage gap data in quartiles for their workforce. So this isn't about, a company publishing the list of all their employees and their salaries, but they have to make some indication of the wage gap. And while it's just focused on gender, many companies have started taking it a step further and reporting on different types. So that's a big one. And I think that, there's that, unfortunately, that requires kind of government intervention, and whether the government is willing to do that or not, remains to be seen. But what we can say is we've been doing a lot of reporting on law firms as well as part of the Power Gap series. And I was able to view confidential salary records for one very large law firm on Bay Street, which showed that female partners were making 25% less than male counterparts. Fast forward, 20 of the 25 largest law firms in Canada now say that they are open to sharing this wage gap information. And that's huge because you can't fix what you can't see, right? So step one is just getting a baseline. I could talk a million ways about the ways to fix this, but let's just start with the most basic level, is that we don't really know what the wage gap is in Canada. Again, that 87 number it's not meaningless because it's a tool, but it's just so high level. You need to break it down because the wage gap is different in different sectors for different people, different types of work. And again, you can't fix what you can't see.
Benchmarking. I like that. Yeah. I like that. That's great.
You can release wage gap data similar to what happens in the UK, not just based on gender. And again, just having those benchmarks to know what you're doing here. And it's not just on wage gap, but also, the the makeup of executive teams and management teams. And it's not necessarily that places even necessarily need to publish this for the world, but certainly within your own company, you should have access to have an understanding of what the makeup is of your leadership within your organization.
Hopefully, with these types of investigations, people will wake up to the fact that we need to do better and that we can do better.
Keep the foot on the gas.
One question actually before we leave I had was that, C2 Montreal is in Quebec, and you found something very interesting about the gender divide in Quebec. I'm curious about that a little bit.
So I can't say that my knowledge of Quebec is like as robust as the rest of the country, but what I can say is that at least in terms of the leadership roles at universities, there were more women and they were paid slightly more than women in those equivalent roles in other parts of the country. This is very limited in what I'm able to say because the data is so limited, but I think that was interesting. It was a bummer not being able to dig deep into Quebec because Quebec obviously has the best childcare situation in the country, and certainly I heard over and over again that the situation would be better in Quebec because of that. Because the number one thing that everyone says that would make things better for women is a proper national childcare program. I live in Toronto. I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. They're both in daycare. They are not at a fancy daycare. They are in a regular YMCA, and I pay about $2,500 a month to have them both in daycare. So you think of, my husband and I both have good jobs, and it wipes us out. You just constantly think of, I have no idea how other people do it. So obviously in COVID, we're about to have schools shut down here again, and kids will probably be sent home from daycares because daycares mirror what's happening at schools. And we'll be doing what we were doing at the beginning of the pandemic, which is balancing childcare and then working to midnight every night, trying to make up the hours. I'm kind of on a complete tangent here, other than to say kids make it really hard on women. So Quebec has that. I would love to have been able to kind of dig deeper into how much better Quebec fared overall.
Yeah. National childcare plan is a solution that I heard extracted from that, though. That's also something hopefully we can see in our lifetime. Well, thank you so much. I know we're out of time. We're over time, but Robyn Doolittle, I really appreciate your reporting. I appreciate talking to you, and just thank you so much for doing this important work.
Well, thank you so much for having me on.
I encourage you all to read the Power Gap investigation at the Globe and Mail. And to continue the conversation about working women, please leave your comments below and follow us at C2 Montreal.